homeschoolers who just want to be left alone to educate their children at home. They don't go knocking on other people's doors telling them that they have to homeschool. They don't insist that homeschooling be taught as an alternative lifestyle. They just want to be left alone. I'm on the board of the National Rifle Association. Second Amendment. Again, gun owners simply want to be left alone with their Second Amendment rights. They don't send out flyers telling you that you should be a hunter. They don't insist that fourth grade kids be taught books in school entitled Heather Has Two Hunters. They just want to be left alone. Businessmen and women. They're not asking for business stamps. They're not asking for subsidies. There are some businessmen who want subsidies. They're on the other team. But the ones who just want to be left alone, as self-employed people, as businessmen and women, just want to be left alone to run their businesses. And then all the various communities of faith, people for whom the most important thing in their life is practicing their faith and raising their children, again, they just ask to be left alone. And this confuses the left and some on the right, because we can have evangelical Protestants, conservative Catholics, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, and Mormons, all in the same movement, all in the same party, all there for the same reason. They want to be able to practice their faith and raise their kids. They don't necessarily think the other guy around the table is getting to heaven because he or she misunderstands Scripture. But if they're to be free to practice their faith, then everyone has to be. And politically, they are aligned, even if they have serious disagreements theologically. So around our table, everybody's in because they want to be left alone in one particular zone, the one they vote on, the one that moves their vote. Now, this doesn't mean everybody on our team agrees on some list of 10 points. They don't. Doesn't mean everybody on our team agrees on secondary and tertiary issues. They don't. Listen to talk radio. We can have all sorts of interesting debates. But on the issue that moves their vote, they're not in conflict. The guy who wants to go to church all day looks across the table at the guy who wants to fondle his guns all day and says, well, that's not how I'd spend my time. But it's not necessary that we agree how we spend our freedom. It's necessary that we agree that we should all be free. And if somebody else wants to spend their time, oddly, it's their business. As long as they leave me alone to spend my time doing important, useful stuff. That's and that's our coalition. Ours is a low-maintenance coalition. You may remember the New York Times back when Reagan sort of put this coalition together. I don't know how consciously or not, but when he brought it together for the first time in the 1980 presidential race, they said, well, these coalition, you got these guys who go to church and these people with jobs are going to fight any moment now. And, I wondered at times, why do you think they're going to fight? They're each in because they want to be left alone in the zone that matters to them, and they're not in conflict. They don't have to have dinner together. They don't have to live in the same neighborhoods. They don't have to think the other guy is right on everything. They don't even have to like the other people. I mean, a country of 300 million people, if we're going to get 60% of the vote, and we have to earn 60% of the vote if, after the other team is done stealing votes, and our candidates forget to mention DUIs until the last minute of elections, we better earn 60 if we're going to have 51 when they finish counting the votes in Chicago. But the good news is that we can in the United States. I do believe that the center-right, the Leave Us Alone coalition, properly articulated, earns and deserves 60% of the vote in the United States and can win it, as Reagan did. Now, who are we up against? The left, the Takings Coalition. People who view the proper role of government as taking things from other people and giving them to them. And their coalition, I got a call a while ago from a newspaper reporter who says Hillary Clinton was just in New York and she gave a speech to the fundraising group and said, we need one of those meetings like Grover has where we all get together and think together and plan together and work together. And the reporter says, so what do you think of that? And I explained how our center-right coalition works together and why people can get together and share information, let everybody know what they're doing, and that they're not in conflict on vote-moving issues. I said, Hillary can't put together that meeting with her people. I said, who would be around Hillary's table? Okay, trial lawyers, government workers, unions, the big city political machines, The two wings of the dependency movement, those people locked into welfare dependency, those people make $90,000 a year, managing the dependency of others, making sure none of them get jobs and become Republicans. Then you've got all the coercive utopians, the people who are going to use your tax dollars to perfect you. The radical environmentalists who make cars too small to put entire families into, toilets too small to flush completely, the various rules, you're not supposed to wear leather or date girls, a whole list of things they have that's slightly longer and more tedious than Leviticus. And they want you to pay for the privilege of your moral edification at their hands with the state behind their advice. All those signs you see out there about not being legal to smoke in Nevada. But they have a whole series of rules that they want. So around the table, everybody on the left is there for a different reason. And they can work together as long as there's more money coming in the door, coming in to the center of the table. Then the left can sit around the table cheerfully and look like the scene in the movie after the bank robbery. One for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. All the bad guys can be friends until they start to run out of money. And if we do our job correctly and put our foot on the air hose and say no new taxes and mean it, and stop the flow of our tax resources into the center of that table, then everybody on the left's coalition begins to look at the center of the table and realize there's not enough money for everybody. Sort of one of those reverse duck, duck, goose situations. And then Hillary's coalition begins to look like the second to the last scene of the Lifeboat movie, where they try to decide who to eat or who to throw overboard. Because there isn't enough for everybody, and the left is not made up of friends and allies. It is made up of competing parasites. Our job is to force that conflict. When we don't give them more money, they can and will gnaw on each other. So if we stop sending the money, for the next 2 years they'll have to gnaw on each other, so that when we meet them in the next election, there are fewer of them and they're slightly shorter. So those are the two coalitions in American politics. And the challenge for those of us who want more liberty is, how do we get more people in our coalition? How do we find more people who should be in our coalition? Not all the groups in our coalition existed 20, 30 years ago. Certainly the people who are with concealed carry permits, now 3-4 million Americans with concealed carry permits. That's a movement that really started 10 years ago in Florida. It's now 40 states have passed concealed carry laws. I mean, they may be able to get guns away from somebody who hunts once a year for 2 days. They are never getting the guns away from somebody who's used to carrying. We've created an interest group for liberty in people with concealed carry permits. The homeschooling movement, maybe 1 million, 2 million strong. Not everybody reports. It's something that really has only come up in the last 20 years or so in terms of strong growth. Those people who've taken the government's government's offer to educate their kids for free, or at least babysit them for 12 years, and said, thank you very much, I'll pass on that, and I'll do it myself. Those people are not giving up their freedom easily. So how do we find more people who are or should be on our team? And how do we take a look at the left and see how can we get somebody on the left kicked away from that table by their own people? Every time the left turns around and kicks somebody out and says there's not enough for you, that former left takings coalition becomes a free radical and may be able to come over to our side. And we say, hey, come on over to our side. We'll give you anything. But they've decided not to give you anything either. So come on over to our side. There may be areas of freedom that are important to you. So those are the two competing coalitions. Everything that we're trying to do now is to create more of us and fewer of them. That's why step one in this whole process is the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. Americans for Tax Reform, as Carrie was pointing out, for now 20 years have been asking people to take the pledge, sign the pledge, and keep the pledge. And the good news is that for Congress and the Senate and the presidency in the last 10 years or so, 95% of all the Republicans running taken the pledge and kept it. So you could walk into the voting booth dead drunk, not know anything about the candidates, vote for the R, 95% certainty that person will not raise your taxes. Not a bad starting point when you're branding candidates for office. And I would argue that this is one of the reasons the Republicans have been successful, is that we have been able to say to people, you can trust that we won't raise your taxes at the national level. The state level, only a third of Republicans have signed the pledge and kept it. And so you see states where the Republicans have lost their brand or had to fight to maintain it because some Republicans have wanted off and raised taxes. I would argue that the Republican brand as the no tax increase party is one of the reasons for their success, and it mirrors what happens in the business world. You can go in and buy a Coca-Cola at the store. You pick it off the shelf, you throw it in your basket. You don't have to look at it. You don't have to taste it. You don't have to ask your friends what they think about it. You don't have to sort of look at it and read the labeling. You know what's there because there's quality control. Coke wants to make it easy for you to take their product home and not have to spend a lot of time examining it. If you get home with your Coke bottle and you're halfway through it and you look down and notice that there's a rat head in what's left of your Coke bottle, you don't just say to yourself, I may not finish this bottle of Coke. You actually begin to wonder whether you'll buy Coke in the future. And you tell all your friends about the cool rat head, and you go on local TV and show them the cool rat head. And lots of people begin to wonder about whether it's safe to drink Coca-Cola. Republican elected officials who vote for tax increases are rat heads in a Coke bottle. They damage the brand for everyone else. This is not a victimless crime. It's not as if, well, there's Fred over in the corner raising taxes. Isn't that sad for Fred? No, because when a Republican raises taxes, small children get confused about the nature of the world. Mom, you said Republicans, and right there's one raising taxes. And so it's very important that we maintain the brand, make sure that no R's raise taxes, and continue to move people in that direction. Now, not raising taxes is step one, as we have discovered or focused on in the last 6 years. Spending is also a challenge, and saying no to tax increases is the necessary but not sufficient project, okay? If you don't say no to taxes, then taxes become what you do instead of governing. Taxes are what you do instead of reining in spending. So there's no such thing as, well, let's be open to tax increases and spending cuts, because tax increases feed the beast and become an excuse for higher spending. So first you nail down taxes. And we're getting there. We're doing okay at the national level. We need to do better at the state level. And it's going to take us another 10 years to get into the cities. But this is very, very doable. Spending needs to be tackled. We've had some success with earmarks. Why? Earmarks are a fraction, a tiny fraction of the amount of money that the government steals from us and wastes in Washington, D.C. Why do we focus on earmarks? Because they're discreet, they're visible, you can understand them. The $900 hammer, the $1,000 toilet seat that came up during the Reagan years and had everybody focused as the idea that some money is being wasted here. And so earmarks have given us that opening, and we need to make sure that our elected officials, the one who claim that they're going to be good on taxes and spending, use that opportunity to rein in spending totally. I would like to recommend to everybody here that they take a look at the transparency movement. It's new. It's just gotten going in the last year. The state of Texas has put all of their spending up on the web in a searchable way. Missouri, by executive order, Governor Blunt has put up on the web the pay of every government employee, the governor's expense reports, okay, the contracts and grants put out by the government verbatim, so you can search them. Indiana's done it for the contracts that the state has let out, so that you can go and use them in a searchable way. Kansas, Oklahoma, Minnesota, and Hawaii have all made strong movement in this direction with legislation that has passed already. Florida next year will pass a law, the votes are there in both houses, to require every local government, every school district to put all their expenses and expenditures on the web searchable. Imagine the quality of candidates that we could get for school board if you could go to the internet and look at every contract, grant, and dollar spent by your local school. One of the problems we have in getting good school board people to run is that all the information is held by the government and by the present school board guys, the teachers union. It's legally available to everybody. It just sits in the basement somewhere, and you have to come on Tuesday, and you have to know what page number to look at to make any sense of it all. But it's not really accessible to people to get into. Once that's open, then every candidate for office could say, I'm running for school board, and my campaign is the 25 checks that were written by the school board last year that would not have been written if I was on the school board. Let's look at those checks right now. You can go into every chamber of commerce meeting, Kiwanis Club, and make a case. Right now our guys stand outside the school and say, the kids talk funny and they dress funny, and you know there's something wrong, but we can't articulate what it is that's not working. So I would argue that transparency is the next step. No tax increases. Transparency on spending will give us dozens and hundreds of bridges to nowhere in every state and town and city in this country, and that will give us a spending revolt such as we've had a tax revolt in the past. A couple of the trends that help us, and I'd love to take your questions. A couple of the trends that are moving in the right direction. When Reagan got elected, 20% of American households own shares of stock directly. 401ks, IRAs, mutual funds. Today, that's 50% of households own shares of stock directly. 60% of adults, two-thirds of voters. Two-thirds of voters. This changes the world. When the East Germans revolted against the communists, one of the communist supporters said, we need to get a new people. Not a new government, a new people. In politics, we're getting a new people. The biggest demographic shift in this country is not the number of people whose parents speak Spanish. It's the number of people on shares of stock. And it changes who you are. There's some wonderful polling data done a while ago by Scott Rasmussen, the 6,400 people they looked at. If you have $5,000 or more of stock, it makes you 18% more Republican and less Democrat. And that makes sense, because the Democrat position used to be, oh, I won't raise taxes on you. No, I'm going to raise taxes on the big corporations and give everybody in the room $1. And a number of years ago, 10, 15% of the people in the room go, well, I own stocks. That's coming out of my pocket somehow. But there aren't very many of us in the room. So if we slouch down and hide, maybe we won't get hit twice. And everybody else in the room is going, get $1. This is a great game. Let's play this again. And so when something's free or underpriced, people buy too much of it. And government was free and underpriced because it was from corporations and not for real. Today, you give that speech, steal money from big corporations, give everyone $1. Half the families in the room go, that's my 401k you're looting. That's my defined contribution pension. That's my mutual fund, and I hate you forever. And so it's been extremely helpful. So I think that's one of the cheerful things that's moving forward in terms of reshaping the electorate, and it's continuing to move forward that way. That said, question or two, and then tell me when we're moving on.